Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Younker. I am the Assistant Vice President and Advisor to the President for Sovereignty and Government-to-Government Relations. I am so pleased to welcome our guests today in a very traditional way, how we would do so on the Oregon coast. Whenever a group of people come to visit us, they usually come in by the tides, by the water, but they don't necessarily jump right onto shore and come and greet us. They don't want to do the pop-in. They want to sing their way in, make sure that everybody knows that they're coming, and also that they're welcome. Soon as people on shore, the Coquille, hear that people are coming, they run out to the shore and they greet them with a song. And the song generally means, welcome, we're happy to hear you. So this is more of a Coquille coastal tradition. And of course, guests as they were arriving would be receiving gifts. Native people were very, very generous with not only their lifeways, but also with some of the things that they had made culturally and had hoped to increase their status through giving. So today we are going to sing in our guests, Irma and Amber, and we're going to sing a very simple song. If you already know it, it's really easy. If you don't know it, it goes something like this. Heyana heyanina, heyana heyanina, heyana heyanina, heyana heyanai. Really easy. We don't have a whole bunch of refrains to go through. Really easy song. It says, come on in, we're ready to eat, actually. So what we'll do is we will stand as the people grab their drums, as they grabbed whatever noisemaker they could. Sometimes the kids grabbed sticks, and they used that as a drum beat. So since you have neither sticks nor a drum, you're going to be doing this, which is an alternative. Yeah. You ready? Here we go. Heyana heyanina, heyana heyanina, heyana heyanina, heyana heyanai, heyana heyanai, heyana heyanina, heyana heyanina, heyana heyanina, heyana heyanai, heyana heyanai. Heyana heyanina, heyana heyanina, heyana heyanina, heyana heyanai, heyana heyanai. Ho! Welcome, guests. And go ahead.
So we would also like to present to our guests from 8th generation wool blanket that's indigenous designed, indigenous produced, and it's the confluence blanket, which represents a place of gathering, a place of exchange, and a place of building relations. And so we want to welcome you with this gift.
Oh, my goodness, is it true?
Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Christopher Chavez. I'm the director of the Center for Latino, Latina, Latin American Studies. I want to welcome you to today's Centerpiece conversation, which is a dialogue between two outstanding scholar activists. The format of the conversation is going to be our two participants engaging one another in a conversation, leaving some room for question and answer towards the end. But I wanted to introduce both of our guests today, again, who are exceptional in the work that they're doing. We have Amber Starks, who is an Afro-Indigenous activist, organizer, and cultural critic. Amber is enrolled in the Citizen of the Muskogee Nation and is also Shawnee, Yuchi, Quapaw, and Cherokee descent. Her passion is the intersection of Black and Native identities. and her passion and her activism seeks to normalize, affirm, and uplift the multidimensional identities of Black and Native peoples through discourse and advocacy around anti-Blackness, Black liberation, and Indigenous sovereignty. We also have Dr. Irma Alicia Velasquez Nimatuj, who is a Maya Quiche journalist, activist, and Stanford University visiting professor from Guatemala. She's an international spokeswoman for indigenous communities in Central America and was the first Maya Quiche woman to earn a doctorate in social anthropology in Guatemala. Irma writes a column for El Periódico de Guatemala and is the author of several books. This fall, she joined the anthropology department as a visiting professor, where she teaches a course of indigenous women and territories in Latin America. So please join me in welcoming our two guests. So Irma, I think you have the first question.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for this beautiful gift. Yes. Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to say thank you to all the people that have been working for this symposium day. And also, I would like to say thank you. In my Maya calendar, today is the Kukup Akpu. This is the day. So I would like to say thank you, Kukup Akpu, for this day, for all the win, for the life of everybody here, for the life of my colleague, Amber, and for the life of all indigenous pueblos that live in this area and in United States. So, Amber, we meet through Zoom.
Yes.
It is the first opportunity that we have to meet in person. So one of the questions is, when we are talking about the activism, what is the meaning of this word, of this concept in your culture, in your life?
Yeah, so I also want to say I'm really grateful to be here. Mado, everyone, for everyone who worked on putting this all together. It's been quite a joy to see it all happen and all come together. And I do want to say, yeah, we met for the first time last night in person, and we had the opportunity to kind of hang out and try to get to know each other. But I think one of the things we talked about is we wanted to continue that conversation here, where we want to invite you all in as guests to a conversation where we're wanting to get to know one another. And we talked a little bit about activism and what activism means, and I think we both talked about it feeling not quite the right word, for the work that both of us like to do or are doing. I know that I struggle with the word. Activism is something I think I use on my resume or my CV or my introduction, but a lot of times I feel like it's incomplete, or maybe I feel like one has to earn a certain amount of stripes before they're considered an activist, but I think the work that I do maybe is more around advocacy for Afro-descendant peoples and indigenous peoples, peoples I come from. I do a lot of thought exercises. I think about the ways Einstein used to think about physics before he did equations. He would sit and think about, try to conceptualize the things he wanted to explain, and I feel like that's a lot of the things that I do, especially online, where it might take me 3 or 4 days to think through something, and then I'll put a sentence online. And so a lot of times it's missing a lot of nuance. But I think I just want to have conversations about how we get free. I want to have conversations about who we are outside of settler colonialism and white supremacy and all the other isms that a lot of times I think we forget that's not who we are. It's not our inheritance. We were born we weren't born to be of these systems. And so I think a lot of times I'm trying to interrogate interrogate who we are, what we are outside of systems that see us as commodity or see us as product or whatever. And so I think a lot of times I'm just doing thought exercises, and there are so many people that I feel like I've learned from, and people who challenge my own thoughts, and I feel like a lot of times I'm learning in front of people. You know, I'm building my politics in front of people. So the work that I do around affirming Black Native identity and uplifting indigenous peoples and Afro-descendant peoples, I do it because it is who I am. It's what I really genuinely care about. And I want to keep envisioning something bigger than the constraints or the confines of systems that dehumanize us. So I don't know if that's activism, and if it is, I'm okay with it, but it's more of advocacy for oppressed and marginalized and disenfranchised folks, but in particular, Black, Indigenous, Afro-descendant peoples. How about you?
Okay. You know, when I hear the concept of activism, you know, I have been thinking about my culture, about my community, and the history of my country, and I didn't find this concept in my community. You know, it's like activist is more like an outside term. You know, we are part of the community, and we have responsibilities. Yes. This is part of what we need to do. You know, especially if we have some privileges. In my case, I recognize that I have a relative privileges, and I need to use this for my community. But it's not only I, you know. Everybody in my community has a gift. Everybody. So everybody needs to use their own gift, and this gift is important because they need to put is not only for individual challenges, but for all the community challenges. So it's outside my community, the activism is more common, and also this term is more common in Guatemala after the peace agreement was signed between the guerrilla and the government in 1996. So when all the international organizations came to my country in order to support the NGOs, the indigenous organizations, women organizations, the activism term was more common.
Yeah, and I remember last night when we were talking about our roles in our community, how sometimes it feels really complicated because sometimes we can feel compromised. Like we might be asked to do something by a government organization, or an organization, and it may feel like we're working with, quote, the enemy, or we're working with a group that maybe doesn't come from our peoples, and it may feel like we are compromising ourselves. And I know that when we were talking about it last night, we were talking about the ways that sometimes people from even within our community are asking us, you know, why are you working with those people, or you know, why would you be working with, quote, the enemy, and how sometimes we feel torn, right? We feel torn about, are we doing the right thing? But as you said, sometimes it's about using our gifts using our gifts and the privileges we have to be able to bring awareness to problems that are happening in our with our peoples or within our communities. But I know that I really resonated when you were talking about that last night, how sometimes you question whether you're doing the right thing or whether you're saying the right thing, and is it actually moving us forward, or is it causing more problems for the peoples that we come from?
Yeah, and another important point for us is in the middle of my community or in the middle of Guatemala as a country, we have in Guatemala the 24 different indigenous groups. And I am part of the Maya Pueblo. And inside the Maya Pueblo, we have 22 different indigenous groups. But I don't have the right to talk in the name of them, you know? Right. So it's very complicated. My position is very complicated. In some time, I recognize that I need to speak up for the situation that my sister and brother are confronting in the hands of the government. But when I am in the middle of all the indigenous women, I can't say that this is my voice is your voice, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think we live in the middle of the borders, you know, and the borders are not very clear. There are complex borders, you know?
I agree. I feel like even as a Muskogee woman, I think I identify as someone who's reconnecting, which means that I didn't have the opportunity to grow up within community, being geographically and culturally separated because of where I lived. It's even hard for me to speak for Muskogee people. I try my hardest, you know, especially online, not to say, you know, Muskogee people are all, you know, all Muskogee people or anything, really anything about my culture, because I think it's inappropriate, you know, and so, and I worry about the harm I can cause. I'm always constantly kind of worried, even as I speak to indigenous issues, like as a collective, the things we're going through, I'm really mindful of, you know, like you said, I'm really mindful of whose voice I'm speaking for, or, you know, I speak for myself and I speak about ideas that I think about, but it's, yeah, I think it's a very slippery slope, how one speaks to issues and who they're speaking for. So I
you know, I recognize that we have many different spaces, you know, community spaces, regional spaces, national spaces, and international spaces. So we need to play between all those spaces. And sometimes it's not easy, sometimes it's difficult, because we also need to recognize that we only are part of a long line of a struggle.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. And I think that's, and I'm going to speak pan-indigenously, I think that's something as indigenous peoples, we understand that we are part of communities, right? That we oftentimes under colonial ideology or Western ideology, there's the individual, but I think in a lot of ways we understand that we are people, like we belong to a community or group, and that there's responsibility being a part of that group or a part of those peoples. And yeah, based on like if it's your tribe, your nation, your country, like there's respectful ways to go about speaking for or about issues that come from that you are wanting to speak to. So I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to that one, or
no. How about, do you have some personal story about someone who is a model for you, or you know, in this struggle in your life?
It's really hard to think of one person. I feel like when I think about where I am now, I'm a product of so many people investing and believing in me and reminding me of who I am, starting with my parents. You know, my dad, even though we didn't grow up in community, would always remind me, he would say, "Your creek." And I think as a little kid, I didn't really understand what that meant because I didn't have anywhere to like center that because all I had was my dad and, you know, my brothers, of course, but reminding me who I come from, my peoples and who I come from. I just think about the Black community, which I mostly grew up in, who modeled, quote, activism or modeled community and modeled liberatory practices, who modeled fugitivity, running from systems of oppression, but also modeling that we are the authors and architects of our liberation. Like, we create our pathways out of systems. And even though I didn't understand it as a little kid, you know, that behavior and that fight was modeled for me. And so I think as I got older, it was just, I guess, fate, or it's maybe not fate, kismet or something, that I ended up in spaces like these, because this is what was poured into me as a little kid is, you know, you fight for your people, you speak up when things are wrong, and you help one another, like we help one another. And so I think the foundation of this work started in community. And then I think as I got older, reading a lot, James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, a lot of I would say Black elders and ancestors who have already done the work, right? A lot of what we're enduring now, what we are navigating now, our predecessors have already done that, right? Like, a lot of these things are very cyclical and institutional, and I think this generation of folks, we're realizing we have our elders to look back on and see, you know, the strategies of resistance, the strategies of liberation. And so I don't know if I don't know if there's one person, but I'm thinking about just the multitude of people who have done this work, whether educators, activists, community members, and I never want to discount people with lived experiences, right? Because I think sometimes we create hierarchies in who is more of an activist, or whose voice is more valid based on credentials and things like that. But I've seen so many people within my community who have no credentials do real on-the-ground work, and they're just as valid as folks who are doing the research and can do quantitative analysis about like how we got to where we are. And so I just want to say, like, I value the people whose voices are heard the least, and I value the work that we do for ourselves, dreaming and hoping, and I think that, you know, a lot of times I relate to the idea of like the fugitive slave who is on the plantation, has no idea what's outside the plantation, but understands that the plantation equates to death, that the plantation is about slow death. Sometimes it's, you know, brutal violence, and it's like, you know, you don't belong there. You know that this isn't, you know, your inheritance, and so you run, not necessarily knowing where you're going, but are taking a risk. And so I feel like a lot of the knowledge that I've acquired, or people who have taught me about advocacy or activism, are people who have just ran. Like, they just left the plantation, and because they knew something was better, you know, something out there was better. And so I feel like that's what I relate to, you know, fugitivity. How about you?
Well, in my case, I would like to share with you some of the incredible women that are part of my life. Rosalina Tuyuk, she is a Maya Cachiquel. She survived the genocide in Guatemala, and she's part of a incredible organization. The name is Conavigua, and they are working for justice, and also they are looking for the people that disappeared in Guatemala. More than 45,000 people were disappearing in my country, and the majority of them is still disappearing now. So she's part of this great struggle. So Rosa, when I was a child, I know her, so her work is incredible. Also, Rigoberta Menchú. Rigoberta Menchú was very important for us because in the middle of the genocide, Rigoberta left Guatemala and she traveled to different countries, also to the UN in New York and also in Geneva, speaking up about all the atrocities that were happening in Guatemala. So Rigoberta Menchú, I read her book when I was in my first year in the university, and it was very dangerous. We keep this book inside our staff, and if the police find you with this book, you will go to the jail, and probably they will kill you only for read her book. So Rigoberta is important, and I recognize all her work. But also Doña Juanita Vázquez Arcón, she's also a incredible woman. She's a lideresa, una lideresa orgánica in our country. She was part of the guerrilla movement, and also she played an incredible role in order to teach the communities all the history of the oppression. So she was very important in my life. Now she's a lideresa. She's also an organizer in Guatemala. Sorry. Doña Otilia Luz de Coquille, also she's another indigenous woman that she has been working during many years for the justice and for the all the right of the indigenous women. Las señoras de Sepursarco, the grandmother of the Sepursarco, also they are a great example. They are a great model for me because they confront sexual violence during the genocide time. And 30 years later, they try to find justice using the justice system in Guatemala. And as we talked yesterday, the justice system in my country, inside it is a lot of corruption, so it's difficult. So they need to wait 30 years in order to find justice. So the majority of them only speak Quechua. They never went to school. They live in poverty, but they change the justice system. So this is incredible example of how the people that live inside many oppression have the ability to move not only their spaces, but also the national institutions. And she's a Telma Cabrera Ordóñez. She's incredible because she in the last election, she ran for president of Guatemala, and she was in the fourth place. So all the elite in Guatemala was very worried about her. She's a campesina. She went only to elementary school, but she is very clear about the history of the community, the history of Guatemala, the story of their parents. So she is part of my models in Guatemala, and this is part of my family. My grandmother, my mother, and my mother here also, and my community. So I am part of a long way, you know. So I be only a pequeño granito de maíz, you know.
Yes.
That's it. And I recognize that I have a lot of privileges. And now I have the opportunity to work with Rigoberta Menchú, to work with communities, to work sometimes in the UN, or also in the justice systems. So I think when I was a child, my dream was to go to university, and almost it was impossible for the situation of my country. And now I feel a lot of responsibility, and I have a lot of models, a lot of mujeres that are my superheroes, you know, las mujeres que son mis heroínas. So,
yeah, that's really
That's
beautiful. I so appreciate you sharing. And it reminds me that we are a continued tradition of folks who, like I said, have always been like the authors of our freedom and our liberation. And it's just a reminder, all your beautiful pictures are just a reminder that of the power we have.
And those are my favorite photos.
Oh, they're really beautiful.
Yeah, especially my mom, no? She was a small business, but always she support us for change or reality and the reality of all community.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
So yesterday, Amber, also we talked about the soberanía.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Soberanía for our pueblos, for your community, and for in your case, in the personal story and the history of all your pueblos, soberanía is very important.
Yeah, I think sovereignty is, I think it's something that I'm still learning. What does it mean? I think I've developed ideas about it, but I also understand, sovereignty within the context of the U.S. Tribes wanting to be our own nations, self-determinate, have the right to self-governance, the right to autonomy, the right to choose our own destinies, and to be acknowledged for who we are outside of settler states, settler governments. And I think that a lot of times when we're talking about sovereignty, we are talking about, the political aspects of sovereignty. And I think that there's a lot of times where I'm thinking about inherent sovereignty, the sovereignty that is, as indigenous peoples we're born with, that no government, no settler state can tell us who we are, who we aren't. And I think that I understand the importance for a lot of tribes of like federal recognition and being seen by the current settler state as legitimate. And I think though there's a lot of people who are doing the work, whether the settler state acknowledges us or not, inhabiting our inherent sovereignty. And so, yeah, again, this is an issue that I try not to speak for all tribes. I think tribes should, again, be self-determinant. And but I believe that, again, we exist outside of these systems. And if and when these systems fall, we know who we are. And, at least I hope we do, or that we are learning who we are, reclaiming and understanding our inherent sovereignty so that we can practice our political sovereignty. But I do think it's something, you know, in Indian country, as we call it, that we're always speaking to and trying to navigate what sovereignty means, while we're also enduring the project of settler colonialism, while we're enduring the projects of racial capitalism and white supremacy. So it's, yes, I feel like I am just one, like you said, a drop in the, you know, pond of a whole bunch of people who are trying to understand what sovereignty means. Is it, you know, based on our connection to like land? Is it our inherent sovereignty? Like what does that mean? And so I think that there's a lot of conversations happening, and it's something I'm really interested in. And I think as a means of, again, helping us to understand who we are outside of these systems. So I think it's a very important topic. I think it's something we're constantly talking about. I think recently, even in my tribe, the McGrick case, where the Supreme Court was trying to determine if Tulsa, Oklahoma was still a part of my tribe's reservation, and it voted in favor that yes, it was, and now we see how the state of Oklahoma, the governor of Oklahoma, is trying to push up against it and claim that Tulsa is not our territory, Muskogee territory, in spite of the Supreme Court's ruling that it is, right? And so I think that this is an exercise of sovereignty for us to push up against, you know, push up against the state of Oklahoma and saying like, this is our land, this is our territory, and even how, you know, the governor is still trying to push back and trying to ask Congress even to dispossess us of our lands, of our reservation lands. And so, yeah, I think sovereignty is always at the forefront of a lot of the work that we're doing here in Indian country.
Yeah. What do you hope, Amber?
Again, something I think about a lot. You know, I want to be free. I want other people to be free, especially I just think that we've endured so much under these systems. I think we've been resilient in ways that we should have never had to be, right? When I think about resiliency, I think about getting through the winter, not surviving genocide, right? And I feel like I want us to experience life outside of these things that dehumanize us. I want us to have clean air and clean water. I want us to be able to practice the traditions of our peoples. I want us to thrive in our humanity, thrive in our existence as peoples. I don't want us to be commodity or be the property of other people, right? I want Black, Afro-descendant, indigenous peoples, all peoples who experience oppression, but a lot of times I speak specifically to being Black and indigenous because that's my experience, right? Again, I'm careful of grouping just everybody in, but I want authentic Black liberation where health outcomes aren't determined by, you know, how much resources get put into my community. I don't want our skin color to be a determinant of how long we live. I want land back. I want our peoples to be able to come home to the lands of our ancestors, and I want us to thrive. I don't expect perfection. I feel like a lot of the work we do, sometimes we're dreaming of utopia, but I don't think utopia is necessary to be able to thrive in our Blackness or in our indigeneity. So yeah, I want authentic, indigenous sovereignty. I want us to yeah, I want to be free. I want other people to be free. And so I think that that's what I'm hoping, what I dream about, and all the tactics that I'm trying or the things that I'm doing within community is about loving our peoples and supporting our peoples, and yeah, getting to freedom. And I don't know how we do that. I don't have the answer. I don't think that there is one way to do it. I think that there are diversified strategies that people are working on, and I think that we should try things until we get there, right? We should run until the plantation is far behind us, you know.
Yeah.
How about you?
Well, my hope, my dreams is to see the change of this economic system, because this economic system is destroying the life of all indigenous people right now, here in U.S. and also in Argentina, in Guatemala, in everywhere, also in the other part of the world. So we live in the middle of a strong economic system that not only is economic but also is racial, is class, is gender oppression, is colonialism, is all the effect that the colonialism that we confront now. And the indigenous people are losing the lands almost every day. Every day in different parts of the country. The power of the companies is incredible. The transnational capitalism is responsible for the majority of the transformation and responsible for, we are losing systems, ecological systems, forests, people, languages, cultures. So, you know, this is my dream. It's probably impossible. I will die, and probably I never will see another system, you know. But as indigenous people, we believe in utopias. We believe in dreams, you know.
Yes.
And this is my dream, and I know my daughter, all the members of my family also will work for these dreams.
Yeah. And I think that we're the products of our ancestors' dreams, right? Like you and I are having this conversation because other people dreamed, right? They may not have seen the fruit of that, but like you said, we may not see the ends of systems in our lifetime, but there would have been a time where I wouldn't have been here with you. I would have been on a plantation or who knows where else, right? And so I constantly, another analogy that I'm always thinking of in my head is that I'm responsible to pick the fruit of, you know, my ancestors and do something with that fruit. But it's also my responsibility to plant seeds, new seeds, so that the generations after me can pick that fruit, harvest it, and use it. And then simultaneously, it's my responsibility to be weeding, you know, the seeds that oppressive systems and peoples have planted as well, right? Because while we're doing this work to get free, there are people, like you said, transnational corporations, governments who are planting seeds to ensure that we remain, you know, as oppressed folks. And so I think that it feels dire. It feels, you know, very apocalyptic. But I think as indigenous peoples, as oppressed peoples, we've always been planning post-apocalypse. And these other places are planning for this new apocalypse that they've never experienced, right? Because now it's affecting them. But I think that we as Black and indigenous, Afro-indigenous peoples, we're planning for the post-apocalypse because we see the potential in something greater than this. And so I definitely am overwhelmed. I definitely feel hopeless sometimes. But what other choice do I have other than to envision liberation, other than to envision something greater than this? And I think that that's what I hold on to, is that I'm here because somebody else planted a whole bunch of other seeds, so that I could even speak. And so when I'm weary or when I feel like I should just be quiet, I remind myself that my ancestors are in me, and every time I speak, they have a chance to say things that they wouldn't have been able to say when they were alive.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you.
I wonder if this is a nice pivot point to open up questions, if it's okay with you, to the audience. So at this point, I'd like to invite questions from the audience of our two guests. And you could just raise your hand, and I'll come over and come to you. Any questions?
Hello, thank you so much for everything that you've shared and for letting us witness this conversation. I was curious how you see kind of the value and power in these conversations sort of across national borders and between sort of the context of decolonization and sovereignty in Guatemala and in the United States or in Muskogee territory, and what that sort of international conversation opens up for you all.
So I think it's something we talked about, yesterday when we were just kind of hanging out, of what are the differences between, our communities and, being international. And I think at the heart of it, as Irma was saying, there's a global project of settler colonialism, right? There are these global projects of like transnational corporations coming in and stealing indigenous lands and genociding indigenous peoples. And so there are a lot of commonalities amongst the things that indigenous peoples experience, no matter where we are. And I also think that, we're also talking about privileges, right? There's privileges based on, where we live. But I think that we're fighting very similar fights, just in different ways. And I think I learned so much from Irma last night about her community and the things. One of the things we were asking each other is like, what do you hope for? What do you dream about? And Irma said to me, we don't hope, we just dream. And it has like stuck with me so much because, there's a lot of times where I'm trying to be hopeful and trying to, I'm trying to be positive about where we are. And I think it really struck me when you said, like, we're just dreaming. We don't know, maybe hope is not the right word. And that was just something really different that I never thought about. I don't know if you want to expand on that. Or.
Yeah, thank you for your question. We can find some differences also. I would like to add that, it's not the same. I think it's not the same to live as an indigenous people in rural areas that to live in cities or in the first world versus to third world, There is a differences. The effects of the colonialism in the people that live in the communities is hard, it's worse. The situation there is complex. So the effects of the colonialism is depend, no? Now we can see all the situation in the south border. The majority of the people that are there are from my country. 30,000 are children. Could you imagine this? This data is sad, but this is a consequence of the colonialism, of all the history of the oppression, and the continuity of the elites in the power. The elites in Latin America control countries, almost all the countries. They have all the power in the justice system, in the Congress, in the executive, so they control almost everything. So we need to differentiate, in my opinion, the experience between countries, between areas, and between histories.
Thank you. I think we have time for maybe one more question from the audience. Any questions?
Hello, thank you both for coming. I'm Brian Klopatek. I'm Department Head in Indigenous Race and Ethnic Studies, so it's a pleasure to have you here. And both of you, and Amber, who I know, and to have you here as well, Dr. Nimatuj. So my question is for Dr. Nimatuj, how do you think about this idea of sovereignty? Are there elements that are useful in Guatemala and elements that make no sense? How do you think about it in that context? And what lessons do you draw from thinking about the U.S. versus Guatemala, those kind of sovereignty questions?
Thank you so much for your questions. We talk more about the self-rights, not only a soberanía, because soberanía is more difficult for us. The soberanía, I try to understand when we talk with Amber about the soberanía. We don't talk about soberanía in Guatemala, and I try to think about the other indigenous communities in South America, but we are talking more about self-determination. The right of self-determination is very important. The majority of indigenous people talk about this, discuss about this, because self-determination has relationship with land, with natural resources, with culture, with the power of the indigenous leaders inside, or the derecho indígena. This is the part of the self-determination. So probably it's more the use of the terms. Probably the meaning is the same for both, for here and there, but we talk more about soberanía alimentaria, for the food, but not for political. So it's a little different, but probably at the end is the same.
Thank you very much. So I think we are nearing the end of our hour, but before we go, I wanted to invite Irma and Amber to offer any closing thoughts if you wanted to, or we can move towards.
I'm just grateful for you, Irma. I feel like the last couple of days has been really a pleasure to get to know you and to talk about all the things that we got to talk about even before coming here. So I just want to say I'm grateful for you, and I look forward to a continued friendship and learning more about the work that you do and your peoples. And yeah, I feel very much like a seedling compared to you. And so thank you, Mado.
Thank you, Nambar. Thank you so much, and thank you also for me. It's a special to meet you and to talk with you. Also, I would like to say thank you to everybody that for coming here. And I would like to say something that is related with my life. And I will repeat again, when I was a child, my dream was to go to university. And now I am teaching in the university. So this is, for me, this is incredible. So my responsibility is try to share the values, the story, the confrontation. I don't want to romanticize my community, but to share all the struggle. And I would like to say that everybody has a gift, and todos, everybody, we need to use our gift in order to change this world. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we're
Malteosh.
Yeah.
And we are grateful for you sharing with us and for the wisdom that you both bring. So thank you for being generous with your insights and your experiences and your truths. I also want to thank the audience for coming and attending and joining us in this conversation. Good luck, everybody, and we will see you in our next panel.